Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to AusBooks, where I'm just talking about random Australian books I own, and now it's a daily thing, and it's so fun. But we have a very interesting book today because we're back to nonfiction. You've had free videos of fiction and poetry and all that, because we're talking about today the one and the only William Buckley with the Life and Adventures of William Buckley by John Morgan. This was published in 1852, and it's like a memoir, pretty much, like a biography memoir. We'll get to it later. But you may be thinking, who on earth is William Buckley? Well, this video is mostly going to be me talking about his life with the occasional reference to his memoir and all that stuff. But because Buckley lived such a crazy life, and I don't think he's ever really had justice to what he done. And yeah, let's talk about Buckley because you probably have never heard of him. So he was born in the late 1770s in England. He worked as a bricklayer when he was 15, but then joined the army, or like the military, I should say, when he was 18. And one thing you'll know about Buckley very early on when you Google him and all that stuff is that he was freakishly tall. He was 6'6", or 198 centimeters. He was 4 inches taller than me, and he was considered very, very ugly. A lot of people say he had smallpox and all that, but I'll show you a photo of him because it's one of the real things you'll hear about him was how freakishly weird he looked. And here he is right there. That's him with his mutton chops and all that stuff. But yeah, so he served in the Netherlands during the Napoleonic Wars and all that. And it's there when he would, according to Buckley himself, a lady gave him a roll of cloth, and he would hold on to it, but he would get caught with that roll of cloth, and it turned out that cloth was stolen. And so he was sent to Australia, or back then New Holland, for 14 years to a life sentence, just casually. And he was sentenced. He never saw his family again, of course. But he was gone pretty much. He arrived in Australia in 1803, and he was a very skilled man because he worked as a bricklayer, so he was given more freedom pretty much. But he only lasted as a convict for like 3-ish months because him and 6 other men would decide to leave. Buckley and 5 other men would escape. Very controversially, because they were under the command of the lieutenant of David Collins, who we've talked about in AusBooks before. But yeah, those 6 men would escape. They would run into the bush in Sydney, and they would slowly make their way down into Victoria. And what would happen was that 3 of them were either died or turned themselves in, while the other 3 kept on trekking along with Buckley. And eventually, those 3 men, 2 of them decided to go their own ways on a different path, and Buckley was like, I'm just going to go on my own and see what happens. So Buckley went on his own. He was officially by himself, nearly died. There's so many accounts, especially in here, about him being so close to death until he's noticed embers of a fire. And he saw a group of Wavarong people who were Aboriginals, and pretty much he would stay with them. He became one of them. He hunted, he fished, he done everything. He blended in terms of the lifestyle, like literally just joined their little group, and that's how he spent his life. And this is where it gets crazy, right? Because in Victoria, as it continued to be mapped out, the state, this is where it gets crazy because 32 years later, as these group of explorers were mapping out Victoria, and especially around Melbourne, where it would be, Buckley emerged out of nowhere from the bush, and these men were so shocked because he disappeared 32 years ago. And he was saying, get out of here because the tribe that I'm with is plotting to kill all of yous, and if I'm just letting you know, you guys have got to get out of here soon or you won't live. And so he very much saved a lot of people's lives from that. But after that, they were so shocked. Like, you can read the accounts of, they barely recognized him. They only could tell because he had his initials as a convict that was still on his skin and all that. And also, it would have been so shocking to see someone that you would have thought had been dead for 32 years. But they pretty much convinced him to come back to Sydney in the penal colonies, and he was given a very important job as being what was he? He was given a job as like interpreter for Indigenous people. Again, talking about his experiences and all that. He had to learn English again because he hadn't used it for over 30 years. And he eventually moved to Tasmania and married. Apparently, his wife was so short that she couldn't even like reach his arm or something. Like it was really weird. And they had a daughter together. And in the 1850s, he retired, or a bit earlier than that. But in the 1850s, he was thrown off his horse and died of those injuries at the age of 76, and which would have been a big fall for someone that old. But then you think of how old Montaigne was when he fell off his horse and somehow lived. But don't forget, Buckley was freakishly tall. And yeah, that's William Buckley's life. A very interesting man. But this is where this book comes in because John Morgan helped Buckley ghostwrite a memoir when Buckley was 72. So he only lived for a couple more years. They pretty much done it for money. And it's pretty much the only source we have of Buckley's travels and just what he experienced. Of course, you got the actual, official records, but again, this gives you a lot of other stuff along with it. And yeah, it's just him talking about his life, and it's really interesting. It's very polarizing as a book because of people don't know if it was very much designed to myth make William Buckley, and also some of the way it talks about the Wotherong people have been debated whether it's a good representation or not. I've seen both reasons on both sides, but at the same time, this is literally one of the only sources we have of Buckley. And there has been many books about him since, and I still think this is the best one. A lot of them, again, kind of tend to get lost in the myth making of the man, the myth, the legend, who was William Buckley. Some of them try to frame him as like a vigilante and all that stuff, which I don't personally agree with. Again, I think he just ran off and kind of got lucky. But yeah, just the fact that he resurfaced 32 years later would have been absolutely insane. And this is just his account of it. It's very fun, very fast-paced reading. You can find this in public domain because it's prehistorically old. And this is the Text Classics edition. This has got an introduction by Tim Flannery, which is really good. And it talks about why Buckley has kind of been lost to time a bit. Maybe it's because he doesn't fit into the mold of the standard relationships that we think of when it came to the British and the Indigenous people of the 1800s. Because it's always been considered that they just did not get along at all. When we do have certain events and certain moments where people like William would become friends and live with the Indigenous people. Again, it wasn't always the truth, but people like William kind of tend to get pushed to the side because it doesn't really fit that mold, but it's still here and it's still really nice. Again, you don't have to go into this blind. I think you can go into it blind. Great introduction by Tim Flannery. This is a very cheap edition, unless you find some like antique edition of this book, but I still think it's the best biography of best written book about Buckley. And yeah, that's your AusBook for today. A bit of a weird one, but a bit of a personal favorite too. The more you read into Buckley and his travels, you will absolutely be like, why hasn't there been more books about him? And I really do feel the same. But yeah, that is your AusBook for today. The Life and Adventures of William Buckley, written by John Morgan. I forgot to also mention, Buckley did help with the biography too. He told Morgan all the stories, and Morgan, ghost written and all that. But yeah, and this marks a very turning point when it comes to AusBooks because we're about to hit the gold rush. Which is going to completely change the country in so many ways that I don't think anyone knew at the time. And get ready for some books about that in the next coming days. But yeah, have you read this book? What do you think of William Buckley? And do you have any more recommendations about William Buckley? Because he's so interesting. But yeah, thank you so much for watching BookTube, and I will see you next time.